And I know yet.
Well, Glen and Carlson. That's all they can call me. Sometimes they have other names for me.
It's the only one we'll put on tape. Well, Glen...
This country, but it's the only thing we got yet that there's any money in.
As far back as, say, 41 or 42, were people looking at moss as a godsend?
Well, we did. I don't know if too many other people did or not.
What did you deal with then when you sold your moss?
Well, first moss we sold, I think, with the J.J. Gallant. Joseph Gallant, he run a store.
Than it has ever been before they ever built a plant here.
Yeah.
The plants have done... Well, what do the fishermen think of that?
I don't know what to think, but I've done laid in bed a good many nights and wondered what the companies was trying to pull.
What would you say? Well, when you were lying awake at night trying to figure that out, what kind of thoughts went through your mind? What did you figure out?
Well, it's funny why they have so many different prices for different, and the stuff was right at their door. Now, why would they, last spring, would they buy moss here? They'd take shore moss and they paid 3 cents for it. Well, they didn't want this stuff from down east. They thought it was mixture. But yet they went down last spring, being as it was an election year, I'll say it in plain English, and pay 4 cents for it, haul it up on the top of the bank, and then run over it with machinery and bury it. And when they couldn't get it, they'd load a front-end loader with sand and crawl up on the top of it and dump it onto it, and then go over top of the sand and get another shovel full of it.
Some strange practices, eh?
And pay 4 cents for it. And they would only pay 3 cents for pure moss here off our shore.
Was that last year?
Although they claimed there was too much sand in ours. Well, there's lots of sand down at East Point. From Brackley right straight through, there's lots of sand.
Was this in 74, Glen, that they were doing this?
Yeah, 74. They started here the 1st of April. They opened the plants wide open. And they take anything at all. Well, last fall when they were done, Coal Lodge was supposed to be short of £1 million of moss yet. And they were running, Bennett Keefe was running. He wanted the scales put in. He hired a lad from Tignish, I don't think he never got them in till June. Sometime in the winter, they had all kinds of moss. Where'd they get it?
I don't know.
Huh?
I don't know. Do you know where they got?
I don't know either.
Are they still looking for it this year? They want...
No, they said they don't want moss.
All of them?
The whole works of them.
Even Genu?
Well, Wendell claims he's done the 10th of August. Quit. He got word no more supplies for the fishermen.
What about Genu? Are they buying?
They're buying, yeah. One day Coal Lodge only wants 2 or 3 boxes. The next day they want all they can get. The next day they don't want it again. It's hard to figure out.
Where is that now? Is that in every port or just in Miminigash?
Down at Tignish. They're not buying in Miminigash at all. They weren't getting enough moss, so they laid all their buyers off. I think they only had 2 votes at Miminigash.
So they get most of their moss from what?
Tignish. They got Jerry Biot buying in Tignish, and I think that's what they... Well, when we quit there at Sika Pond, they moved right back in.
Marine
Coal Lodge did. Where we shut out, when Ronnie shut down buying at Sika Pond, they moved right back in.
They claim they're going to get about 12 million pounds this year, wet, at marine colloids. Does that make sense to you?
Where are they going to get it?
Well, I guess they're going to buy it from fishermen unless they cook it up in the soup pan at home, eh?
Unless they're growing it with the fisherman bounty money.
No, they say they're going to take it right off the boats.
I can't see it.
They claim they put almost 1 million pounds through last week through their dryer. Does that jibe with what you've seen them doing on the wharfs?
No. They're not by the pile. I see it back of the building every time I go by, and I go by in there every day.
Just doesn't look that way.
Don't look that way to me. Unless they're drying an awful lot of moss at night, because it's not there in the daytime.
So it's
I never paid. I'm up here, and I can't see their plants. I don't know if this. And I went by 2 or 3 times last week, and that plant is closed at night.
At Marine.
Yeah.
So it's pretty hard, as far as you're concerned, it's pretty hard to sell moss to marine colloids in any harbor this year. Is that the way you look at it?
Well, it seems that way.
And you knew?
You know, I got no idea what you know was doing. I ain't paying that much attention to them.
And Wendell Stewart is on...
Wendell Stewart is just buying there at Mimnegashin at Howard's Cove. He claims he gets an awful lot of rock at Howard's Cove. And I know he gets an awful lot of them down here, too. I seen him one night picking rockweed with the wheelbarrow. Rocks and rockweed. So one fella told me that he pulled out a basket full of moss and he picked 200 pounds out of it.
Of rock?
Yeah, at the side of the pile. Now, I'm not telling that for the truth. It's just what somebody else told me. I didn't see him doing that, but I did see him picking the rockweed with the wheelbarrow.
I heard a good story.
Aye?
I heard a good story at Mimnegash Run today about a 28-pound rock, and they wondered what rake brought that one up.
Yeah. Well, I know I was down there one night and we were standing behind a bunch of traps, and there was a lad come along and he was looking down at a big granite rock was at the corner, and there was another fellow standing over behind another pile of rock, and he said, "Fella, you can leave it there." He said, "I was watching it all night." What to say we're going to put in his boat.
So,
Well, you can go into it, you can get on the back of a truck. I would haul moss there from Seeker Pond. And anybody that can't tell when there's rocks in his moss, there's something the matter with his feet. Because you don't need a fork to find rocks, because if you just walk on the moss is spongy and it don't make any difference. The rock could be down 10 inches, and when you step on it in the moss, you know it's there. And you pick up a 5 or 6 pound rock on a fork, and you know it's on the fork. I don't care who he is.
do you sell most of your moss dry or wet, Glenn?
Well, mostly it's dry.
Mostly dry.
Well, they're not too fussy on buying wet shore moss here.
No, I
Although
mean,
they tell me that cold, you know who is buying it. I never tried to sell them any this year.
you never. What about wet raked? Do you ever rake?
No, I never sold no wet raked moss either. I raked moss the only time I raked moss was with a pole. Cents and buy it here for 5 cents and take it to haul to the States for 3 cents, he couldn't do it. There's no way in the world he could get it up there for 8 cents.
You thought he was getting more for it than that, eh?
Oh, I figured he'd be getting more for it, yes.
Well, what about, you were in pretty close to the start of this cooperative that has been set up to buy marine plants.
Yeah.
How did that get started? And how much involved in that were you, Glenn?
Well, like I said, I paid the first $10.
You're the first member.
I wasn't the first member. They had meetings, but there was nobody. When I went to the meeting, I was up here at the corner of the road, and a fella come looking for hay with Clifford Wedge over here. He was in it. I was supposed to have joined it. He had put his name down. He was to go to meetings. I didn't know nothing about it. First, before the crop ever started, I went down here to run, and they were rowing over the price of moss and not getting enough for it. And they were raking. It was the 1st of May, and they were dragging it in and drying it and selling it for 5 cents. I said to a couple of guys, I said, "I got lots of lumber. Just come and help me cut it. It won't cost you nothing. Just help me cut it, and we take it to the mill, we saw it, and we build a building." And I said, "If you got 100 fishermen to throw a ton of moss apiece into it," I said, 200,000 pounds of moss, dried. And I said, "If the companies want it, they'll have to buy it from you." I said, "If they're that eager for it and they'll buy it right off of the ice," I said, "they must want it." Well, they wanted to know, one fellow wanted to know when he was going to get paid for it. I said, "Suppose you never got paid for it." I said, "You're dragging and pulling it up at the bottom, and you're giving it to them for 5 cents. You might say nothing." So I said, "If you sold a ton in the building and you got paid for it this fall and you did get 10 or 12 cents for it, you'd be in money." But they wouldn't listen to that. So when Clifford Wedge was going to this meeting, I asked him if I could go to it. And he said, "Yes, you can come." So I went to the meeting, and I think there was 16 people in the meeting. And they talked co-op, and shares, and how they were going to start and everything. And I just sat and I listened. They adjourned the meeting, then I got up and I asked them if I could join it. And Wilson said, "You can put your name down like the rest." But nobody, and I said, "What's the fee?" And he said, $10, but nobody has paid it. So I paid the first $10 right there that night. Then I told them I'd cut the lumber for the building and give it to them. But Wilson wouldn't hear to that. He said, he just said when I told him I'd donate the lumber, he said, "In the name of God, where'd that fella come from?" So they told him that I was cutting lumber and hauling it to the co-op. So he said he'd get a specification of the lumber that he wanted for the plant, and he'd give it to me. So it come a big snowstorm while he was figuring up how much lumber he wanted, and I couldn't get in with a tractor or a horse or nothing. So I got Claude Elworth and my brother, and we cut the lumber and we carried it out on our back. And I hauled it to the mill and I got it sawed and took it down there, and Wilson paid me 8 cents for the lumber.
8 cents a board foot?
But the lumber at that time was 12 cents. Sawed lumber. So I just barely got enough out of it to pay for the fuel and the saw bill and the hauling it down there.
You want to co-op that bad?
I wanted it that bad, yes. And I still want it. Because I figure it's the only organization in this country that's any good, because we're so far away from the markets and everything. It's the only thing that's any good to a fisherman or a farmer, that he can put his money into it and get it back out.
Were you ever in any other cooperatives, Glen?
I belonged to one of the farmers, Boffin O'Leary. I bought a share in that. I ain't got very much money in it, probably $39 or $40. I don't go to O'Leary that much to buy there.
Yes.
I go in, I get a bit of pig feed ground at the mill, but the only thing, I don't buy too much at the store because I'm never in O'Leary. Unless I want something real bad, piece of machinery or something, they got to go to Keir Ramsey or some of them up there to get it.
Can you sell anything to that cooperative in O'Leary? Any of your farm products?
Oh yeah, I guess you can.
Do you? Do you sell anything?
No, I never.
They're not a marketing agent for...
Well, they sell potatoes and stuff. They'll buy grain, and they'll buy potatoes. But I dealt here so long with Frankie Shea, I don't know. It just seems that I can't leave St. Louis for some reason.
Frankie Shea gets along pretty well running that store in St.
Yes.
Louis, eh?
Well, he's a very fine gentleman, Frankie Shea.
You were saying before that you thought that he'd done a lot for a lot of people in the area.
He did. He done a pile. And I suppose he's got, like Wendell Stewart got a pile of money out in the area. And probably a lot of it he'll never get.
I mean, that between the two of them, there's a lot of people that are...
Well, they kind of depend on Frankie. Well, you might say he practically feeds that Smith Road, because they buy credit from him all summer, then they go in and they work in the potato house in the fall. They get their stamps from him, and they get their unemployment. And he keeps a big crew working all the time. He grows a lot of potatoes. That's the only thing him and I get an odd chew once in a while over growing so many potatoes. And that's why I can't get nothing for mine. The big fellas all grow the potatoes. And it's getting so now that I might be wrong, but them fellas are growing so many potatoes they don't want to see us little fellas around the warehouse. They have enough potatoes of their own without us. Unless it's a tough year that there's no potatoes, well, they're going to take them wherever they can get them, like the moss. If they got lots of moss, they're going to want good moss. And if there's no moss, they're going to anything that comes ashore, even sand.
Do you figure they'd like to be growing their own moss, too?
They'd like to, and I don't doubt, but probably they will if the government gives them enough money.
You think the government would give them money to do that? Which government?
Huh?
What government do you think would give money to do that?
Well, it'll have to be the federal. Well, the provincial government probably got some into it too, but the federal government, where's their bounty money? What do they do with it? They put it out for research, and that's research. Huh?
Might be going that way. You never know.
Well, the fishing bounty, they give it here for the... Now, them papers you had the other day, I was going to say something about it, but I just let it drop. The Americans paid that money here for destroying the inshore fishing with a fishing bounty, and all the fishermen got up with the interest. It varied from $4 probably to $18 to each fisherman. But it was a multi-million dollars. And Jack Davies was Minister of Fisheries, and he took it. And they put it into research work. Some of it went down here probably in the oyster business, and probably a lot of it has gone into the moss. But it's all gone for research, fishing research work.
Who paid that bounty before?
It was American money.
Where did it come from?
The Americans? I don't know what they destroyed, but they call the inshore fishing here. But the Americans put up the money for the cover, and all with the fishing bounty for the fishermen, and all they got was the interest.